Welcome, dear child of the Most High. You did not click on this by mistake. You were attracted here, summoned to a moment of truth. Before we begin, if something deep inside your soul is already stirring, leave a comment at 777 saying, "Yes, this is confirmation. I am chosen." And thank you from the bottom of my heart to everyone who has contributed to this ministry through Super Hanks. Your faith, support, and presence are all more important than you realize. Whether you've donated or merely said a prayer over this message, your light powers this mission. Now, lean in close. Have you ever puzzled why people you barely know can't stop talking about you? Why does your name appear in rooms where your feet have never been? Why people who previously ignored you are now enthralled with every move you make? You see, there is something odd about you that people can feel but cannot articulate. But what if I told you that their talk, looks, and murmurs are all about your anointing, not your past? Here's something they'll never admit out loud. You don't simply pass by. You leave a spiritual trace. You change atmospheres. You awaken the secret areas in others that they fought hard to keep concealed. You carry a frequency that reveals what is phony, fragile, and unprepared to ascend. And that is terrible for those who have not done the inner work. So they talk. They congregate in hidden places, create phony narratives, and pass off fascination as criticism. But if they aren't feeding you, liberating you, or funding your mission, why are they still so obsessed with you? What is it about your presence that makes even quiet seem loud? Because you, chosen one, are not neutral. You are a disruptor in any atmosphere that chooses darkness over light. You don't ask for attention. You are the focus. You do not seek validation. You disclose what is real. And although some people are drawn to the truth, others avoid it. Straight into talks in which your name becomes the center of attention. Let's go deeper. Did you know that, according to behavioral psychology, people chatter not out of animosity, but out of latent admiration or fear? That means that every word they say about you, whether in admiration or envy, is actually a confession. A confession that your life is a mirror, and they either want to be you or are terrified they never will. But here's where things become spiritual. You did not select to be in the spotlight. God has appointed you. You did not force the shift. You are the shift. You didn't request the influence. You were born with it. Similarly, David was anointed in front of his siblings and then sent back to the field. Your preparation was silent, but your ascent was public. And now, the same individuals who didn't see your worth are attempting to understand your shine. So, if a fly repeatedly returns to the same location, is it due to attraction or infestation? Why are they so infected with you? Because your light reveals what others refuse to face. Stay with me because, at the end of this message, you will not only understand why you are the hot issue, you'll understand why you were meant to be. You'll discover that the true reason they can't stop watching is that heaven has already proclaimed your arrival. Let us get there now. God's chosen people, the actual cause. You are the hot topic of every conversation. Music. Music. There's a deeper reason you've become the focal point of their chats, and it has nothing to do with a mistake you made. In actuality, you are not the problem. They're simply uncomfortable with the mirror you unintentionally hold up. You, God's chosen one, have a light so pure and unfiltered that it cuts through the layers of deception that people have spent years creating to shield themselves. The true reason you're the main topic of every conversation is that your presence awakens the shadows. Others fought tirelessly to silence. You do not need to say anything or cause a scene. Simply entering a room changes the atmosphere. It's not because you want to draw attention, wear bright colors, or demand to be seen. The change occurs when you carry something sacred. truth. It covers your shoulders like a garment, invisible to the naked eye, but unmistakable to the soul. When you enter, they are not irritated. It's about conviction. Conviction can be hard for many people who are unwilling to change. May it be that your entire existence is a heavenly reminder of who they may have become if they hadn't abandoned the truth. This is exactly what happened in Acts 7, when Stephen appeared before the Sanhedrin. He didn't shout. He did not throw insults. He simply told the truth, overflowing with the Spirit. But his remarks cut hard, so deep that they gnashed their teeth and stoned him. Why? Because truth, even when uttered gently, reveals what others desire hidden. In the same way, you do not fight anyone's wounds, but your mere existence shows that they exist. That scares folks who would rather appear to be whole. According to Hebrews 4:12, for the word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart. Your spirit, saturated with God's word, does exactly that without the need to speak a syllable. Consider this. How many people do you know who are constantly pretending? Pretending to be joyous when they're shattered within, pretending to be confident while their heart is dominated by fear, pretending to encourage others when envy consumes them. Then you come in, not performing, not posturing, just being. Authenticity, which is a rare language that most people have forgotten how to speak, disrupts the fragile balance they've established between image and reality. It's impossible for a world built on illusion to be at ease with someone who walks in unmasked. Celebrities have also acknowledged this truth. Viola Davis, the award-winning actress known for her raw emotional performances, once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are." Yet, many run from that very privilege. When you embrace it, you become a silent challenge to everyone still running from themselves. Isn't it revealing that the ones who talk about you the most are often the ones who feel most threatened, despite the fact that you've done nothing but show up? You carry within you the same spirit that was in Joseph. According to Genesis 37:11, his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. His favor reminded them of their own lack of vision and purpose, so they threw him into a pit. Your journey has placed you in situations where others are stirred by your essence, and you don't need to reveal their secrets. Your presence simply confirms that they exist, which is why they gossip. Jealousy doesn't always require a reason. Sometimes a favor is enough to arouse it. Why do some people choose to misinterpret you, even when you've done nothing but radiate peace? You might wonder, why me? Why does my life seem like a war for other people's insecurities? But here's the mystery. You were never sent to fight. You were sent to illuminate, which is why your spirit feels confrontational without being combative. It's not your voice that causes discomfort, but your truth, which has echoes of Christ himself, who could walk into a synagogue and cause an uproar simply by reading from Isaiah. In Luke 4:32, it is written, "They were amazed at his teaching because his words had authority." You walk in that same unspoken authority, and even the spiritually blind can feel it. And what if the constant attention, whispers behind your back, and subtle exclusion were never meant to harm you, but to confirm you? What if this pressure is simply proof that you're pre? Could it be that their rejection is not a curse, but a divine confirmation that you were sent, not to blend in, but to stand out? You see, you're not the one making enemies. You're revealing them. You're not stirring up drama. You're awakening truth. Those who are committed to deception will always be uneasy around those who live in divine alignment. This is why you are the hot topic, not because you want to be seen, but because you were chosen to be revealed. Your name keeps coming up in conversations because you are the living, breathing contradiction to every excuse they've ever made for themselves. You are living proof that comfort zones are illusions and that breakthrough doesn't require permission. Many people may never admit it out loud, but they cling to the belief that success is only possible under certain conditions, such as wealth, perfect timing, elite connections, or a pristine upbringing. This belief system protects their pride by providing a convenient explanation for why they haven't moved, changed, or remained the same. But then you stepped up, not with privilege, not with a silver spoon, not with acclaim or sponsorship, but with faith. You marched forward with bruises and scars, making progress while others just made plans, and your mere presence pushes people to confront something difficult. The idea that they are not stuck because they lack opportunity, but because they have made peace with stagnation. Could it be that your rise is not only inspiring, but also deeply unsettling to those who are still waiting for ideal conditions? You didn't wait for the perfect moment to start. You stepped out when everything around you screamed, "Not yet." You didn't need everyone's approval to proceed. You trusted the quiet whisper of God inside you when no one else clapped. Like the woman with the issue of blood in Mark 5:25-34, you pressed forward through pain, past the crowd, and touched destiny without an invitation. That kind of resilience rewrites the rules. It confronts every excuse others have used to delay their own transformation. You built something out of nothing. You prayed through seasons that would have broken the average soul. You healed without applause. You kept going without a stage. You chose calling over comfort. And when others see that kind of tenacity, something inside them either ignites with admiration or recoils in defense. Some whisper, "She must have faked it. He must have cheated. They must have had help." Because if they admit that what you carry is real, they must also face the truth. They've been sitting on potential, not purpose. What happens when your very existence becomes the challenge they've been avoiding? This is why they analyze every move you make, not just to admire you, but to dissect you. They want to find the flaw. They want to find the flaw in your story. The moment they can say, "Aha, that's where it all comes from." They're not watching to see what you'll do next. They're watching because if your transformation is genuine, their excuses crumble. As Pope John Paul II once said, "The future begins today, not tomorrow." Yet, how many around you are still waiting for tomorrow to begin anything? You didn't wait. You didn't beg. You broke the mold. And in doing so, you exposed the lie that progress requires perfection. You proved that movement in God's will trumps strategy without Him. As Ecclesiastes 11:4 reminds us, "Whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap." You didn't wait for the wind, you planted in the storm. They don't just see you as a person. You're a disruption to everything they thought was true. You're a rebuke without saying a word. Your elevation isn't just admired, it's interrogated. And yet, despite their doubts and suspicion, your fruit speaks louder than their fear. It's no surprise that they can't stop watching, not because they don't believe, but because they do. You're not walking according to their formula. You're walking according to divine alignment, and that's why they wrestle. You've debunked the myth that people need the approval of the world to walk on purpose, and you've demonstrated that the true formula has always been faith. You are not their enemy, but your story is a mirror, and when people aren't ready to reflect, mirrors can feel like judgment. So they talk, twist, and diminish. But one truth remains unshaken. You didn't wait for access. You became it. There's something about you that people can't quite explain, but they can't seem to look away. Whether they admit it or not, they're studying you. Not out of admiration, but out of fascination. Because you've become a living instruction manual for a reality they can't enter. You're navigating life by a script that was never taught to them in their schools, families, or friend circles. When others would lash out, you respond with wisdom. When most would seek validation, you retreat into peace. And when storms come, you stand still, unmoved. This disrupts their understanding of what is possible, because you don't follow the patterns they were taught to trust, and you don't react in the way they expect. Formal education or social status cannot explain that kind of poise. There's a sacred rhythm to the way you move, a deep ancient wisdom that flows through your decisions, healing, and silence. It's not something learned in boardrooms or inherited. It's something entirely different, something divine. What if the reason they keep watching is that your life contradicts everything they thought they needed to survive? You don't just survive. Your healing transforms atmospheres. Even when you think no one is watching, someone is taking mental notes on your journey. They see how you carry yourself after a fall, how you recover stronger without having to broadcast your wounds. In 1 Corinthians 2:14, Paul writes, "The person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, but considers them foolishness and cannot understand them because they are discerned only through the Spirit." Even if they never say the words, their spirit understands the lesson. That is precisely why many people fail to understand you. You live according to revelation, not habit. You are not decoding life solely via reasoning, but rather by relationship with God. This makes you incomprehensible to people who only believe what they can count, measure, or anticipate. Even in silence, you speak volumes. You do not need to disclose your journey, since your fruit will show it. You do not need to justify your process, because your peace has already proven its worth. When they see that, something within them changes. However, instead of approaching you to inquire what motivates you, they frequently settle for gossip. Why? Because stillness requires humility. Many would rather conjecture than accept a truth that disrupts their comfort zone. There's a reason people keep returning to you. They are not just curious, they are searching. They sense in you a strength that liberates rather than dominates, a quiet, entrenched confidence, and a method of healing that accepts the messy, sacred, and in between. You've demonstrated that healing isn't about appearing powerful. It is about becoming whole. That strength does not always roar. It sometimes weeps. Could it be that you're awakening them to a depth they didn't realize they needed? Brené Brown, a research professor and best-selling book famous for her work on vulnerability, once stated, "You either walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside your story and hustle for your worthiness. You, chosen one, have entered into your story. You did not wait for it to be perfect. You welcomed the chaos, the learning, and the shattering. And as a result, your authenticity emerged. That's what makes you impossible to ignore. They can't figure out how you move, so they try to categorize you. They can't find the cause of your happiness, so they doubt your intentions. But beneath the surface, they aren't bothered by your presence. They are plagued by their own need. They see the clarity in your eyes, the conviction in your voice, and the connection you have with something bigger, and they want it. But this is the bit people don't always get. What you have cannot be imitated. It can only be farmed. It was not given to you by imitation. It formed amid the bush, in lonely areas where no spotlight could shine. This is what sets you apart. You aren't just living. You are teaching without trying. You are awakening people without preaching. You're holding up a mirror to the soul, inviting them into an inner realm they had no idea they were missing. And they have no idea it's happening. Nonetheless, they can't seem to look away. That's why you're the subject. Not because you want attention, but because your life is linked with something sacred and eternal. You're not simply following trends. You are following spirit. And that, no matter how hard they try, cannot be replicated. Your presence alone undermines systems that were never established on truth, but rather on control. You exude a certain vibe that makes others uncomfortable. Not because you're offensive, but because you are genuine. And in a society where manipulation masquerades as togetherness, authenticity becomes hazardous. The instant you enter into a room, You question the unseen covenants that everyone else has silently committed to. Many environments, including the workplace, homes, churches, and online, run upon quiet agreements. Pretend, compete, flatter, and do not question the bullshit. But you, God's chosen one, never signed the contract. You do not have to dominate. You don't try to be visible. And this challenges individuals who only feel powerful when others are subservient to them. You do not chase claps. You do not pretend to be kind. You are not addicted to being liked. That alone disrupts systems that rely on emotional submission. Could it be that your peaceful reluctance to conform speaks louder than the most violent opposition? Jesus did the same. In Luke 20, the religious authorities asked Jesus deceptive questions in the hopes of getting him to say something they could distort. But his responses disclosed their deception and exposed their hearts. He did not yell. He did not rebel forcefully. His reality, conveyed quietly, demolished their illusions. Similarly, you avoid exposing anything explicitly. Your spirit works without the necessity for an audience. People can sense that you see through things, even when you remain mute. You do not laugh at false jokes. You don't nod to dysfunction simply to keep the peace. You don't participate in power rituals designed to boost egos or perpetuate phony authority. And if you don't play along, they panic. Why? Because your refusal to participate demonstrates how fragile the game truly is. In Matthew 23, Jesus warns against those who enjoy the seats of honor, titles, and praise but ignore justice, charity, and faith. Aren't many modern systems still based on the same hollow foundation? You are not interested in the politics of approbation. You remain firm in your truth, which threatens those whose power is based on delusion. That's when the murmurs begin. They are too much. They aren't a team player. They believe they are better. But this is not criticism. It's a projection. What they truly mean is that this one sees through us. This one refuses to bend. And when control is your only instrument, someone who cannot be manipulated feels dangerous. Even in the church, this can occur. When religious systems get contaminated with ego, they focus on hierarchy rather than holiness. And when you walk in with genuine spiritual fire, you disrupt the norm. You have no interest in positions. You have a clear sense of purpose. You are not looking for favors from men. You walk in God's favor. This moves the entire room. Isn't it interesting how fast truth turns disrespectful in environments based on power rather than presence? Nelson Mandela, a freedom fighter and worldwide leader, reportedly stated, "I'm not a saint unless you define a saint as a sinner who continues to strive. You are not aiming to be flawless. You are simply reluctant to pretend. That rattles systems that rely on masks. When you stay true to your calling and refuse to clap for chaos or play ego games, you expose a path that bypasses the entire organization. That is why they alter your story. That's why they warn people about you, as if your lucidity were contagious. They'll call you rebellious when you're actually righteous. They'll call you arrogant when you're just aligned. And they will try to isolate you, not because you are a threat to others, but because you threaten the illusion that has kept them in power. But here's the truth. They do not want to admit. Your very life demonstrates that the entire system may be evaded. You did not rise through manipulation. You rose through obedience. You did not get into this position by flattering others. God positioned you. That defies every false formula they've accepted. You aren't here to play the game. You were never made for that. You were assigned to debunk the myth that the game was ever worth playing. That is why they talk. That is why they alter the narrative. Because if others start following your lead and walking in spirit rather than performance, their entire system will unravel. That is what really worries them. Not your presence, but what it inspires in others. Another reason you're a frequent topic of conversation is that people feel powerless in your presence. They speak up not because you have damaged them, but because they are unable to influence you. You are impervious to the techniques that once worked so well on others: emotional coercion, flattery, guilt, intimidation, or silence. And for individuals whose sense of control is based on their capacity to influence others, this is painful. When someone learns they can't control you, what do they do next? The only thing left is your reputation. You cannot be guilted into staying in environments that sap your spirit. You cannot be enticed back by phony affection or weak praise. You do not lower your voice to fit into surroundings that you have outgrown, and you surely do not shrink in order to make people feel comfortable. Why does refusing to conform irritate individuals who claim to want the best for you? Because control has always been the goal. No relationship, no love, and no truth. Control. This is what happened between Jesus and the religious elite. They couldn't trick him with inquiries, persuade him to compromise, or humiliate him into quiet. So they formed a conspiracy. They whispered and plotted. In Matthew 12:14 we read, "But the Pharisees went out and conspired against him how to destroy him. They feared what they couldn't control." Your opponents, like them, aren't fighting from a position of strength. They're behaving out of fear, and you don't react in the way they expect. You don't chase them down for confirmation or ask, "What did I do wrong?" You've gained a spiritual serenity that renders their normal tactics ineffectual. And when others realize they've lost emotional influence over you, they start looking for new ways to feel powerful. When someone else feels threatened by your confidence, it quickly rebrands as arrogance. And when you set a boundary, you're suddenly labeled bitter. Despite its low cost, gossip is a form of control that allows them to shape perception while they can't shape reality. When you choose solitude over codependence, they say you've become cold. These narratives aren't built on truth. They're built on lost control. You've outgrown the cage they designed for you, and now they don't know how to categorize you without those old levers. Maya Angelou, the legendary poet and civil rights icon, says something powerful. When people show you who they are, believe them. But what she didn't need to say, because people often live it, is that when you show people who you are, and they can't handle it, they try to make others stop believing you. That's where the whisper campaigns begin, not because you're the villain, but because you escaped their story. When Sanballat and Tobiah realized they couldn't scare Nehemiah or stop his heavenly mandate to repair the wall, they turned to false stories. Nehemiah 6:8 recalls his courageous response. "Nothing like what you are saying is happening." If you had truly lost, why would they still need to explain your story to others? If they had truly moved on, why would your name still live rent-free in their minds? You are just making it up out of your head, and you, like Nehemiah, are unmoved. Because chosen ones don't abandon their mission just because others are uncomfortable with their strength, gossip becomes their final weapon when everything else fails. Others see you, hoping to isolate you or make you question your calling, but all they reveal is how fragile they've become behind the image they've carefully constructed. As Proverbs 26:24-26 warns, enemies disguise themselves with their lips, but in their hearts they harbor deceit. Their malice may be hidden by subterfuge, but their evil will be revealed in the assembly. Their chatter may appear polished, but it's rotten on the inside. You are living proof that genuine power cannot be purchased, hushed, charmed, or coerced. That's what worries them the most. You do not oppose their persuasion. It renders you unreachable. When someone understands that their manipulation is no longer effective, their words become desperate, bitter, last attempts to rebuild a story over which they have already lost control. Isn't it odd that those who claim to be the least troubled by you nevertheless find ways to bring you up behind closed doors? You were not the one who failed them. They failed to contain you, and now they are talking. Not because they care, but because they have lost. There's a reason why your calm demeanor has become such a draw for people, one that transcends language. What matters is not what you say, but what you do not say. Your quietness, your quiet strength, your refusal to flaunt your existence or beg for acceptance. All of this disturbs those who have never known serenity without pretending. And to them, your assurance does not resemble maturity. It resembles arrogance. Why? Because they cannot understand serenity that is not paid with applause. You no longer follow the rules of performance. You are no longer bending to be noticed or shrinking to be accepted. And that is precisely why they murmur. In a world preoccupied with validation and addicted to commotion, your silence makes people uneasy. Could it be that your silence communicates in a language they no longer understand? They can't understand why you're no longer chasing the crowd. Why do you walk away instead of arguing? Why don't you recoil at rejection? What they miss is this. You are not cold. You're just centered. You are not arrogant. You are just free. When Jesus appeared before Pilate in John 19, he was accused, humiliated, and misunderstood. He didn't argue back. He did not plead. He did not prove. Pilate was astonished by his silence. "Do you refuse to speak with me?" Pilate questioned. But Christ remained unmoved. He understood who he was. In that moment, the world's rescuer demonstrated something powerful. Sometimes, quiet is the most audible form of truth. How frequently have you been misjudged? Not because of your deeds, but because of your refusal to respond to those who continue to want continual validation. Your peace appears to be a source of pride. Your limits are misidentified as barriers. Your calmness is misconstrued for supremacy. They remark, "You think you're better than us," not realizing that you've simply chosen to stop performing. When someone's identity is based on approval, authenticity feels like betrayal. But they don't realize you've also been there. You once danced to applause. You once apologized for being excessive or insufficient. You once attempted to keep yourself together with borrowed smiles and cheap flattery. But you've walked through fire. You've cried throughout silent evenings. You've removed the mask, confronted your pain, and healed from the inside out. You stopped performing not because you are superior to anyone, but because you saw the consequences of pretending. And now that you've tasted actual serenity, the type that doesn't require acclaim, you're never going to trade it for superficial approval again. Brené Brown, a well-known research professor and author, once remarked, "True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are." And you, chosen one, are finally experiencing that truth. However, those who continue to perform for the audience perceive your genuineness as a danger. This was precisely what David realized in the Psalms. In Psalm 131:2, he said, "But I have calmed and quieted my soul. Like a weaned child with its mother, so is my soul within me." That type of peace does not come from pride. It comes from the process, from submission, and from trusting God above humans. But not everyone is prepared for that journey. Those who remain addicted to external validation will constantly misinterpret your peace. They believe you are distant since you do not indulge in drama. They believe you are frigid because you do not respond to emotional bait. They think you're distant because you refuse to be dragged into chaos that isn't yours. The truth is, they are not reading you. They are reading themselves. What if your serenity is really a reflection of their own fear? Freedom has a fragrance, and you carry it. However, liberation is offensive to people who are still imprisoned by false identities. That is why they gossip, not because you did anything wrong, but because you have ceased doing something they still feel required to do. You've stepped into a tranquility they secretly desire, but aren't ready to pursue. You've chosen silence over performance, calm over chaos, and truth over applause. So your presence creates a silent revolution, because true peace, unburdened, grounded, spirit-led tranquility, appears arrogant to people who are still looking for love. And although they whisper behind your back, what they're actually saying is, "I wish I had the courage to be that free." There's something about you that makes people uncomfortable, but it's not because of your faults. It's because you're doing them a favor they can't understand, let alone imitate. You are live proof that heavenly favor is not deserved. It is acknowledged. In their society, blessings must be justified by labor. Grace must be purchased via suffering. Positions must follow performance. But here you are, standing in full light, fully selected, and not playing their game. And this shakes their entire belief system. You did not achieve alignment by charming the gatekeepers. You did not gain influence by advertising your suffering or networking your way into rooms full of pretense. You did not follow the script that they required you to memorize. Still, oil flows. The doors open, and the presence follows you. How can you justify a favor that violates every rule they've built their identity on? This is what angered Joseph's brothers in Genesis 37. He did not acquire his coat of many colors by outworking others. He did not manipulate his way into their father's heart. He was simply favored. And because they couldn't understand how favor could be bestowed onto someone who hadn't earned it, they conspired to ruin him. They disliked him much more because of his fantasy and what he had said. According to Scripture, this is what happens when you are selected, not by merit, but by mantle. Your existence is not the result of checked boxes or perfect resumes. It's in line with the purpose. You did not strive for the light you now hold. You just quit hiding from it. That's why they talk. That is why they whisper. That is why your name appears in rooms you have never visited, because you have become living proof that heavenly favor does not depend on performance. It responds to the purpose. You did not take a bow in response to applause. You did not shatter yourself for approval. You did not feign meekness or create false humility. The grace in your life is not the result of performance. It is the confirmation of a call. How can someone whose entire identity is based on striving possibly comprehend someone who walks in peace because they walk with God? This is what the Pharisees could not understand about Jesus. He wasn't trained in their systems, didn't sit under their rabbis, and didn't fit into their hierarchy. But he talked with authority, healed with power, and drew crowds despite lacking a title. According to John 7:15, the Jews were amazed and asked, "How did this man get such learning without having been taught?" They couldn't grasp that favor flows from divine identity, not institutional validation. Real-life examples support this claim. Consider Tyler Perry, an actor, filmmaker, and entrepreneur who created his own empire rather than complying to Hollywood's structure. He once stated, "What God has for you is for you. It makes no difference who opposes it." That is the language of favor. You carry the same. You did not wait for a stage to be assigned to you. You are the stage. You did not seek validation. You become the evidence. People are panicking now that they have seen your light. They turn your strength into pride. They portray your confidence as arrogant. They term your discernment manipulative. Not because it's true, but because they're afraid that others will see through the performance and recognize the real you. What happens to the applause when people stop clapping for masks and instead celebrate the mantle? That is the threat you represent. The threat is not one of insurrection, but of deception. They toiled their entire lives to create what comes to you instinctively. They made sacrifices, played politics, conducted rituals, and selected images, all to gain access to a fraction of what you carry when you're just being yourself. And now, rather of examining their own hearts, they seek to defame you. They smear your name. They arouse doubt. Because as long as the audience believes you're a fraud, they won't have to confront how hollow their performance is. But they don't grasp this. You never required their stage to be selected. God marked you before anyone noticed. Jeremiah 15 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. I set you apart before you were born." This was not a vote. It was unaffected by social standing or personal admiration. It was a divine selection. This is why you are the target. Not because you broke the rules, but because you proved they do not apply to divine calling. You are a reminder that God's favor is sovereign. It does not consult systems. It does not wait for permission. It selects. And it chose you. You have an evident effect on people, even those who claim they can't stand you. They might claim they despise you, mock your name, or pretend to be uninterested. However, their reactions betray them. You can feel it. Their words say one thing, but their energy sings a different tune, one they can't stop playing. Your presence awakens something in their spirit. It's like a lightning strike to their carefully cultivated tranquility. You instill something raw and genuine in them. And this type of disturbance becomes addictive, especially for people who have lived their lives on autopilot. Have you ever pondered why even those who shun you appear to be drawn to your energy? You are not just another personality. You function at a frequency that awakens individuals from spiritual numbness. And that frequency, unabashedly honest, deeply anchored, and undeniably divine, feels like both a confrontation and a call. A confrontation with everything they've buried, as well as a summons to become everything they secretly want to be. They claim discomfort, but what they actually struggle with is acknowledgement. A recognition that your spirit holds something that theirs isn't ready to receive. They are still unable to look away. This was the same disturbing effect that Jesus had on the people and religious authorities. They were both drawn to and disturbed by him. According to Mark 1:22, the people were amazed at his teaching because he taught them as one who had authority, not as teachers of the law. He wasn't simply speaking, he was reverberating. And like you, he wasn't seeking acceptance. He was walking truthfully. Could it be that you, too, resonate with a spiritual authority that they cannot explain? Some individuals are so accustomed to thin surface-level connections that when someone like you enters the picture, vibrating with authenticity, depth, and clarity, they short out. They've learned to flourish in situations of pretense and ease. However, your energy reveals the fracture lines beneath their routines. It pokes at the numbness they've created. It makes them feel alive and restless, exposed and vulnerable. This is why they lash out. That is why people gossip. That is why your name comes easily to mind, even when you are not present. It is not hatred. It's a spiritual addiction, a yearning for the transformation you symbolize. They can't stop talking about you because you've become the embodiment of everything they're afraid to try. Your frequency represents freedom, which is dangerous while you are still chained. Think of Paul on the journey to Damascus. Before becoming the Apostle Paul, he was Saul, a persecutor of Christians who was strongly influenced by the early disciples of Jesus. He wasn't simply opposing them, he was obsessed, until Jesus himself confronted him in blinding light and asked, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Acts 9:4. It wasn't hatred. It was a spiritual war. Even with his best efforts, Saul was unable to resist the attraction. That is what your detractors are currently experiencing. You're the unexpected interruption that people can't stop responding to. Even in the present period, persons like Brené Brown, a best-selling book and vulnerability researcher, have discussed this phenomena. She said, "People will do almost anything to avoid pain, including causing it." And that is exactly what is happening. Your energy causes people to feel. It ignites repressed emotions and truths they had not dared to confront. So, instead of processing it within, they project it forth onto you. However, their fixation is telling. They may call you names, but they cannot forget you. They may reject your influence, yet they pay close attention to everything you do. They condemn what they can't change, study what they can't comprehend, and obsess over what they can't reproduce. Isn't it ironic that those who dismiss you are the ones who bring you up the most? You've become more than simply a person to them. You've become a living, breathing representation of the courage, peace, and completeness people seek, but aren't willing to pursue. Your very presence breaks their narrative, and until they face that truth within themselves, they will keep coming back to you. You aren't only in their conversations because you're controversial. You are there because you are a catalyst. You've become a spiritual irritant for stagnation. A reminder that life is more than just checking boxes and keeping comfy. And every time your name enters the room, it carries the echo of what they may become if they simply remove their masks. That's why they can't leave you. Not because you are perfect, but because you are authentic. Not because you're loud, but because you're articulate. You're the sound of something greater, and they're still trying to figure out why their soul can't stop listening. They keep mentioning your name, not because you are the villain, hero, or even the center. They repeat your name because it gives them something to hold on to when their own lives feel empty. You, selected one, have become their coping technique and emotional outlet. Every time they bring you up in discussion, it is not about you. They're chatting around their discomfort. It is easier to inspect your travel than to investigate the silence screaming within their own soul. Your name has become their distraction. Every detail of your past, every turning point in your journey, every visible triumph or setback becomes a topic of discussion. Not because they actually care, but because dissecting you prevents them from looking in the mirror. You are unintentionally the TV repeat they keep watching to avoid being uncomfortable in their reality. Isn't it interesting that the folks who obsess over your flaws are frequently the ones who are frightened to look in the mirror? This is what happened to the religious leaders of Jesus' period. They followed him around, criticizing his every action, questioning his intentions, and analyzing his words. Not because he was wrong, but because he was correct. And truth is disruptive when you're attempting to avoid your own. According to John 3:20, everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. You've become that light, unwelcome but impossible to ignore, and they gather like moths to flame, not to be warmed, but to criticize the heat. When they gossip about your choices or whisper about your past, they're really trying to construct a narrative that justifies their own stagnation. If they can paint you as flawed, they don't have to face the fact that they've stopped growing. If they can frame your confidence as conceit or your elevation as ego, they can stay comfortable in the shadows of their unhealed wounds. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." What would they talk about if they weren't talking about you? Could they survive the silence that would result from that question? Psychologists have long recognized this behavior. However, most individuals do not want to understand. They seek distraction. So, instead of confronting regret, loneliness, fear, or failure, they utilize you as the plot device. Not because you welcome them in, but because your life, light, and presence provide something for them to orbit when they have lost their own sense of direction. You did not ask to be their crutch, but that is who you have become. Not out of malice, but because individuals will go to any length to avoid confronting their darker selves. You've become their mental noise machine, allowing them to avoid the deafening silence required for healing. They examine your moves, connections, and growth, not to celebrate them, but to divert themselves from their own stagnant advancement. This is precisely what David experienced. In Psalm 109:3, he laments, "With words of hatred, they surround me. They attack me without cause." Why? Because the instant you rise, your very existence forces people to consider the question, why haven't I moved forward? And for those who are unwilling to answer honestly, it is far easier to shift the focus back to you. Even in our time, persons like Princess Diana, who exuded genuineness and compassion, were constantly scrutinized by the media, not because they were sensational, but because they tapped into something deeper in the public psyche. She made people feel. And when someone makes the world feel, it either heals or lashes back. That's what's happening to you. Your presence awakens something dormant within others. And the waking does not usually start with applause. It frequently begins with resistance, discomfort, and even animosity. But behind all of it is the same truth. Your existence serves as a reminder that the spirit cannot thrive in perpetual avoidance. Could their fascination with your narrative be a cry for help? A sign that their spirit is longing for something genuine, holy, and healing. Your name appears in their conversations because it is simpler than allowing healing to reside in their hearts. But the more they talk about you, the more they betray what they have refused to confront. You aren't the problem. You are the mirror. You represent what they could become if they choose to remove the mask and begin the work. And until they shift that focus inside, until they choose the small path of growth over the wide road of gossip, your name will continue to resound, not because you want attention, but because you embody everything their soul desires, but their ego refuses to acknowledge. There is a reason why your narrative makes others uncomfortable. You, chosen one, are the unwritten chapter they lack the confidence to write. You represent the brave decision they talked themselves out of, the risk they never made, and the healing they never sought. Every stride you take in truth reminds them of the dreams they gave up for ease. You didn't simply survive. You decided to live totally and freely. And that choice reveals the locations in their soul where they have settled. You became the chapter they had envisioned, but never dared to start. They watch as you speak your truth, shed old layers, rise from the ashes, and go forward with purpose. And it arouses something in them, not wrath or jealousy, but something deeper, regret. When remorse becomes too heavy to bear, individuals hunt for another place to store it, so they put it on you. They twist your words, challenge your intentions, and pervert your trip. Not because you are defective, but because you remind them of the freedom they lost. Could their hostility be a cover for their longing? A desire to be as liberated, brave, and entirely yourself as you have become? They whisper, not because you were unsuccessful, but because you did not wait for permission. You wrote your story with scars still evident, tears still drying, and courage trembling in your chest. You were never perfect. You were simply willing. That's what distinguishes you and makes your brightness uncomfortable to those who still live in the shadows of old scripts. This is the same reaction Moses caused. He strode out of the palace and into purpose, abandoning safety for fate. The Israelites initially doubted him, not because he lacked calling, but because his fearlessness alarmed them. In Exodus 2:14, one of them even asked, "Who made you ruler and judge over us?" Sometimes people would rather dispute your authority than face the prospect that their own lives would be different if they had your faith. Even in recent times, Malala Yousafzai, a Pakistani activist and Nobel Peace Prize recipient, has broken the silence on injustice in her nation. She risked everything to speak up, claiming that when the entire world is silent, even one voice can be powerful. That voice is yours. You shattered the contract of silence that generations of people had signed out of fear. You revealed what others were too afraid to admit. You accomplished what others just imagined. Most people adhere to an unspoken agreement. Do not speak too loudly. Do not question tradition. Do not shine too brightly. It's a social covenant disguised as peace. But this is not peace. It's about survival. They inherited it from those who came before them, repeating the same cycle, bearing the same wounds, and adhering to antiquated norms that keep everything tiny and predictable. When you showed arrived, everything started to change. You refused to remain silent about sorrow that had been normalized. You challenged previously unquestionable ideas. You identified patterns that were mistakenly accepted as the norm. You healed rather than concealing. You chose growth over approbation. As a result, you became a threat to the weak system based on quiet rather than the truth itself. Why are they calling you rebellious when all you did was speak the truth aloud? You did not ask to be a disruptor. You simply obeyed. You couldn't unsee what God had revealed. And once you saw it, you couldn't turn back. Jeremiah 29 states, "His word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. I'm tired of holding it in. Yes, I cannot. That fire still burns within you. And the fire makes people nervous. Compliance is not equivalent to boldness. It's a confrontation without trying. You did not raise your voice. Your obedience worked. You didn't breach the rules to harm others. You broke the cycle to heal yourself and future generations. You walked away from roles shaped by fear, and you wrote a fresh script, one that asserts that pretending to be at peace is unnecessary, that joy does not require silence, that expansion necessitates risk. And for others who have established their identity around never disturbing the boat, your movement feels like a hurricane. They do not consider you hazardous because of what you do. They describe you as dangerous because of what you symbolize. A life that cannot be tamed through approbation. You are living proof that true transformation starts when someone says enough. Enough with the solitude, the cycles, and the anxiety. And that is what they can't bear. You tell them that they could have chosen the same option, but didn't. But here's the truth. No matter how many times they try to rewrite your story through whispers and resistance, they can't change the reality that you broke free. You are no longer part of the contract. You are living proof that God chooses, qualifies, and crowns those who refuse to remain silent any longer. You're not threatening because you're loud. You're a menace because you exist. And no amount of editing from the sidelines will diminish the legacy you're establishing with each daring move. Your light does not ask permission to shine, and that alone is enough to upset those around you. You do not wait for approval. You don't pause at the edge of your mission, waiting for applause before moving forward. You move on with clarity and confidence because you have learned something that most others will never grasp. Your calling was ordained by God, not by man. Is it true that others detect arrogance in you? Or is it that your bravery confronts their own hesitation? You bear your gifts without apologies. You communicate without over-explaining. You lead without asking to be followed. And that kind of calm, hallowed confidence frightens those who have been taught that humility entails concealing your grandeur. To them, your audacity appears rebellious. Your presence seems disruptive. But this isn't because you're too much. They've spent so much time feeling inadequate. And your light highlights that imbalance. You were never asked to play little. In Matthew 5:14-16, Jesus proclaimed, "You are the light of the world. Let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Your brilliance isn't just a blessing, it's an act of worship. Every time you operate in your gift with courage and truth, you're glorifying the one who placed that light within you. However, many people were raised on a version of humility that was based on fear rather than truth. When you walk up complete, healed, and honest, it feels like a personal challenge to their belief system. They were taught that being humble entails stepping aside, concealing one's talents, and keeping one's head down to avoid making others uncomfortable. Your confidence becomes a mirror they didn't ask to look into, reflecting back all the places where they've kept silent, played safe, or chosen invisibility over impact. And instead of being inspired, they become offended. They don't realize that your boldness comes from purpose, not pride. Why does your light offend them so deeply if they were never meant to compete with it? Could it be that your shine exposes their own decision to hide? This tension is... In 1 Samuel 17:28, Eliab, David's older brother, asked him, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I understand your pride and the arrogance of your heart." But David was not proud. In modern times, figures like Serena Williams, arguably one of the greatest athletes of all time, have been repeatedly labeled arrogant, loud, or overconfident. When asked about it, she said, "The word confident can be a dirty word, but I am confident, and I'm okay with that." Confidence confronts individuals who are still debating their own worth. And, like Serena, you should not apologize for being precisely who God created you to be. People cling to the pretense of humility like a shield. It's safer to remain little. It's safer to criticize those who stand tall. It is safer to hide fear with fake modesty than to risk truly embodying purpose. That is why your boldness elicits whispers. This is why your presence causes rooms to change. Not because you're doing too much, but because you're doing something they're frightened to do. They call it ego. They term it pride. However, those are projections. Your presence does not lie. It illuminates. Your light cries out for truth in a world built on illusion. And in a room full of masks, the person who appears unfiltered will always be misinterpreted. How many times have you been termed tough because you refuse to shrink? Your light does not represent arrogance. It's an assignment, and it was never intended to be muted for anyone's convenience. A lighthouse does not seek the water for permission to shine. You should not seek affirmation from broken systems or wounded hearts before walking in your anointing. You are a beacon, a reminder that genuine humility is not hidden. It is recognizing both the gift and the giver. You shine not to draw attention, but to reflect the person who called you. And no matter how loud their discomfort becomes, it will not obscure what heaven has already kindled. They don't understand how you are still standing, and since they can't understand it, they tell themselves it's a lie. You've been through fire, rumors, treachery, rejection, and sabotage. They threw all they could at you. Twisted words, intentional silence, spiritual warfare disguised as concern. Your name has been dragged into talks you did not deserve, and your reputation was flung into storms you didn't ask for. Nonetheless, you continue to rise rather than simply stand. Not only surviving, but thriving. How can they embrace your resilience when all they did was meant to break you? Your simple presence in this moment undermines the story they established. If you're still walking with strength, speaking clearly, and loving wholeheartedly, their cruelty wasn't effective, and the fact is too terrible for them to accept. They change the story. They claim you are pretending. They claim that your strength is performative. They think your brightness is manipulation, and your peace is deception. Not because it is true, but because if it is, they were mistaken. And that level of conviction is difficult for someone who is still in denial. This occurred to Job. After losing everything, including his riches, children, and health, he maintained his integrity. When his companions couldn't reconcile his suffering with their narrow interpretation of righteousness, they accused him. They said in Job 4:7, "Consider now, who being innocent has ever perished?" They presumed guilt because they couldn't accept grace. The same is true for you. They believe your achievement is perverted because they do not grasp what it means to be kept by God. People who are unfamiliar with heavenly protection may find it difficult to understand your survival. They have no idea what it's like to be held by unseen hands while everything around them falls apart. They've never understood what it means when Isaiah 54:17 says, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." They see the weapons fired, but they can't understand why you're still alive, and this offends them. You are the proof they didn't want to see. The proof that good can triumph, honesty can last, and faith can survive. But this contradicts their worldview, since they have constructed their lives on the premise that power belongs to the manipulating, strength belongs to the aggressive, and survival belongs to those who compromise. That logic is interrupted by you. What happens when someone refuses to be bitter and still wins? Even today, major leaders such as Nelson Mandela are challenging this view. After 27 years in prison, he emerged not with vengeance, but with grace. People questioned his motivations. They couldn't believe a man could endure so much and still be pardoned. But this is what heavenly favor looks like. It rewrites the impossible. You too did not survive by accident. You were not lucky. You were covered, anointed, and chosen. What they thought would destroy you has become the very soil in which God has planted your next level. That unnerves individuals who believe they have the ability to write your conclusion. Have they ever wondered why, whenever they counted you out, heaven counted you back in? Your endurance disturbs their sense of control because it demonstrates that their rejection does not define you. Their chatter did not contain you. Their absence did not degrade you. What they attempted to bury just took root. And now that you've broken through the earth and begun to bloom, they can't take their eyes away. Instead, they attempt to explain it away. They believe you are pretending because your grin is too unwavering, your strength is suspect, and your retort is too polished. But underlying the skepticism lies fear, the dread that God, grace, and favor exist and have nothing to do with manipulation, applause, or politics. That what they attempted to sabotage has only multiplied. They claim it's a lie because admitting the truth would require them to confront their own brutality, failings, and unwillingness to evolve. If they admit that divine justice exists, they must confront the question, what role did I play in attempting to prevent what God ordained? You, chosen one, are living proof that truth does not perish under pressure, that faith can withstand fire, that resilience is not a personality attribute, it is a spiritual weapon. And this is what scares them most, because your strength is not inherited from the world. It was permeated with bliss. You are the first unequivocal proof in their lives that God is not a religion. He is a relationship, not a collection of rules, a doctrine in robes, or a ritual to be performed. You are living proof that God is extremely personal, unpredictable, intimate, and far more real than the conceptions they have been taught to hold on to. What happens if someone walks in divine favor without checking any religious boxes? That is the question your life pushes them to face. You did not take the road they intended. You did not wear labels that people trusted. You do not use scripted lines or perform for pulpits. Nonetheless, your anointing is apparent. Your existence has a weight they can't measure, a grace they can't explain, and a brightness they can't put out. You do not utter the correct prayers. You embody the kind of faith that transforms atmospheres, and that alone undermines their perception of what a connection with God looked like. This was what Jesus embodied wherever he went. He healed on the Sabbath, dined with tax collectors, and touched lepers. In Mark 21:17, he stated, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." He broke the rules to uphold the higher law, love, mercy, and truth. And you, selected one, are following the same rhythm, divinely disruptive and honestly set apart. Your relationship with God is raw. It is unfiltered. It did not come through stained glass windows or borrowed religion. It was fashioned via storms, stillness, and sacred wrestlings held behind closed doors. That is why it confuses them. You do not fit within their theological mold. Your faith does not wear robes or require stage lighting. It is alive. And because they can't anticipate or control how God will manifest in your life, they label you as dangerous, disobedient, or off track. But you are not off course. You're off topic. You live outside the boundaries of man-made religion. And this is terrible for individuals who have spent their entire lives worshiping the structure rather than the spirit. Could it be that they are reacting to your freedom rather than your defects, since it reveals their limitations? They were taught that proximity to God is achieved through institutions, titles, and a properly managed image. But suddenly, you appeared unconcerned, unsanctioned, and unquestionably selected. And your stillness has more spiritual weight than others' performances. That alone makes you a threat to the system. Even today, we witness this in persons like Pope Francis, who broke down boundaries by washing prisoners' feet, embracing the ostracized, and valuing humility over pomp. He once stated, "God is not afraid of new things. Neither are you." That is what worries them. You aren't terrified of the unknown. You are the unknown, striding with complete authority. Because they don't understand it, they oppose it. They want to drag you back into the box you never belonged in. They attempt to rewrite your tale, clean it up, and incorporate it into their theological checklist so that they may feel comfortable again. But you were never sent to make them feel better. You were sent to uncover the truth. Your existence, like those of the prophets before you, is a live contrast to dead systems. Like Amos, the shepherd who warned against kings with no religious background. Like Mary Magdalene, who became one of Jesus' most devoted disciples after being freed from 7 demons. She was chosen for her willingness rather than her cleanliness. You, too, have a messy grace that causes religious minds to unravel. Your existence forces them to reconsider not only you, but God Himself. You are a walking theology lecture that demonstrates that God does not require middlemen. You are proof that the Holy Spirit lives in reality and not in titles. Man-made order cannot manage that level of freedom. What if your genuineness is the revival they've been hoping for, but are too terrified to acknowledge? That is why they are trying to silence you. That is why they whisper. That is why your tale has been altered, diluted, and even debunked. Because you shed light on everything they've refused to consider. You are not simply a person. They notice a movement in you. You are more than just a testimonial. They feel a shaking in their foundations when you speak. However, their opposition simply confirms what heaven has already determined. You were picked to disrupt, awaken, and set free. You are not simply being talked about. You're echoing. Your life is rebounding through barriers made of tradition, fear, and false humility. You are a living example that divine favor does not require permission, polish, or pedigree. You are the spark in a dry area, the voice in a quiet room, and the fire in ancient systems that have forgotten to burn. So, hold your head high. You were never intended to be comprehended by the old world you were sent to transform. Your tale is not theirs to modify. Your light does not require a filter, and your truth is not negotiable. You are not the problem. You embody prophecy in motion, and that is why you will always be a hot music topic to discuss. Beloved selected one, if you've gotten this far, you already know the truth. You were never simply a topic of conversation. You were always the revelation, unsettling ancient systems, waking buried souls, and living proof that divine favor defies the laws of this earth. They talked about you because you broke the stillness. They questioned you because your strength disrupted their patterns. They attempted to change your story because you dared to live unfiltered, unapproved, and unshakable. You did not wait for permission to shine. You did not ask for a stage. You simply become the light. And every whisper, censure, and attempt to restrain you was simply affirmation of your mission. Your trip revealed what others were scared to confront: that God is not a system. He is a spirit that moves freely, strongly, and intimately in individuals who are willing to sacrifice comfort for truth. You have been misunderstood, not because you are incorrect, but because you are ahead. You are not representative of their expectations. You are a reflection of God's intention. And yes, your name will continue to resurface in talks. But now you understand why. Because you are living proof that healing is feasible, favor is genuine, bravery is holy, and obedience is unwavering. You were chosen to awaken rather than blend in. So, today, elevate your head, walk fearlessly, and continue shining without apology. If this message spoke to you, leave a comment with the number 777 as a prophetic proclamation that you are aligned, assigned, and anointed for this time. Thank you to everyone who has supported this mission. Your generosity fuels the light that reaches thousands. I really thank you, whether you give or simply watch. Your being here is a blessing. If you haven't already liked this message, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs a reminder that they too were never meant to fit in, but rather to break free. Let them hear it. Let them see you. Let them know they are not alone. Until the next time, keep grounded in truth, clothed in grace, and protected by the one who called you before you were even known. You were picked. You are ascending. And no one will forget the sound of your breakthrough. God will bless you abundantly, courageously, and beyond measure.